Hello and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to guide you through creating this design on the screen. Now as always, you can grab all of the requirements from the description down below, which will include the canvas size, the palette, and a reference image as well, which you're going to need for our subject here. Now as always, make sure to subscribe for weekly Procreate tutorials, and if you want even more tutorials from me, I post 3 more every single month over on my Patreon, exclusively to my Patreon supporters. So if you want to come and show your support and get access to that exclusive catalogue, hit the link in the description down below. And with all that said, enjoy the tutorial and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we'll do is go up to our layers, we'll tap on our background colour and we'll pick this colour here. It's the 6th colour on that top row. Then we'll hit done. Next, let's go ahead and introduce our subject. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Chrome because I've got the image here. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up that image. And we're going to go ahead and hold our finger down on the image and go to the option of copy image. Once that's copied, we're then going to go ahead and go back into Procreate. We're going to swipe down with 3 fingers and we're going to go to the option of paste. It's going to ask you, are you sure you want to paste? And we'll paste. And then we've got our subject. Then what we're going to go ahead and do is tap on our cursor when we're done. We'll go to our selection tool and we're going to go ahead and we're going to make sure color fill is turned off. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm going to go to the option of automatic and we're going to tap on our subject and we're going to drag left and right just to adjust the threshold. Now we're aiming for about sort of 20%. So if I tap in there and I drag to the left, you'll see at the very top there, just underneath the selection tool itself, you can see the percentage. And if I drop it down to around about sort of the 21-ish%, we've got a good selection of our subject. Then what we can do is we can go here to the option of copy paste. So what it's done is it's grabbed that selection. If we go up to our layers, we've got our subject on a new layer and we've got the photograph there. We can actually swipe the photograph to the left and delete it. And you've got your subject here. Now we'll actually go ahead and tap on our subject and alpha lock it for a moment. We'll then go to our colors. We'll double tap at the bottom of the disk to select black. And then we'll go back to the layer. We'll tap on it and fill it in with black. That way we can get rid of any sort of extra little colours that were just around the fringes of our subject. Now, I'm going to go ahead for a moment and just move her down towards the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my cursor and just move her down towards this bottom right area. The goal is just to position her there so she's just right at the edge of the canvas. And I don't mind a little gap because we're going to fix it shortly anyway, but we're going to tap on our cursor when we're done. We just want to get our positioning right for a moment. Then we're going to go ahead and add in our moon. So we're going to create another new layer. We're going to go to our colors and we're going to grab the first color in the palette. We'll go to our brush library and under calligraphy and the monoline brush. We're going to go ahead and just any size. I've done it about 26%. It doesn't matter what the size is. All we're going to do is just simply draw in a circle here. Hold your pen at the end and you'll make an ellipse. But if you pop your finger on the screen, you'll get a nice perfect circle. I'm going to make it a little bit larger than I need just for a moment and then drag and drop the color in. Then I'm going to grab my cursor. I'm going to tap on this node here in the top right and I'm going to go ahead and change it to 690 and then that way it'll be the size that I need and we can go ahead and just position that just on the sort of palm area there of our subject. So it's going to be slightly off to the left and I love that. It's just a little bit off centered. So a little bit here and then we'll go to our layer. We'll drag it underneath our subject so her hand is pretty much holding. Now we've got the size of the moon in, I want to adjust the size of our subject. So I'm going to go to that layer. I'm going to grab my cursor for our subject here. I'm just going to make her a little bit bigger. So I'm going to use the uniform option here and drag in the top left just to make her a little bit bigger. And again, position her off to the right again. Just a little something like this and also make her a little bit taller. We're going to give her a bit more of a waist as well, just so we can fit our railings in. And size-wise, we want to be somewhat near towards that halfway point. So I'm going to go ahead and leave her just there. And the size for her, for me, is 1152 by 934. Then I'm going to go back to my moon layer, tap on it, grab my cursor, and then just position that just so that the moon is just nicely running through her palms like so. And then we'll tap on our cursor when we're done. Now let's go ahead and introduce some color to the moon itself. So we're going to go ahead and we can swipe it to the left and duplicate it until we've got 4 of them. And then we're going to select all 4 by swiping from left to right and group them together, just so it's nice and organized. And the bottom one out of the 3, we're going to go ahead and go up to our adjustments. We're going to go to Gaussian blur. And we're going to go ahead and swipe from left to right on the screen, and we're going to go all the way up to 70%. And then we're going to just tap on our layers and go to the next layer. which is the one above. We're going to go up to our adjustments and Gaussian blur on this too, and swipe from left to right on this as well. And we're going to put this one up to 50%. Then we're going to go into our layers. We'll go up a layer to the next circle. We're going to go ahead and go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right. We're going to make this one 30%. Now those glows at the minute are a little bit too sort of subtle and too sort of a bit bland. So we're going to go to our layers and we're going to change the last layer we were working on, this one here, and change it to the option of add. And then we're going to go ahead and tap on it again to collapse that down. We'll tap on the next layer underneath it and also change that from normal and change it to add. And then we'll get a bit more of a glow happening in behind our moon. We're then going to go ahead and tap on the moon at the top here, create a new layer, tap on it and clipping mask it to it. We're going to get started with adding in a little bit of the texture. So we're going to go to our colors and we're going to go ahead and grab the third color. It's black. It's the third color in the top row of the palette. And our brush wants to be set to painting and the fresco brush. Now the size to start with is going to be 6%. And what I'll do is on the left hand side of the screen, I'll put an image of the moon. So you've got a bit of a reference to follow. Now just note, you don't have to match it up perfectly. It doesn't really matter. You're just creating a moon. And the brush isn't going to be super accurate to it anyway, so just have some fun with it. But really, we've got sort of a bit of a crater here, so I'm starting off really light, and this brush will just continue to create like big grooves and big indentations into the surface. So I'm going to loosely just position like one here, another one over here, there's another one just here. We're then going to go and create the larger one just up in this space here. So I'm being very, very light just to start with, just to get some texture in there and sort of positioning. And then we've kind of got like a much larger area just over here that runs all the way off to the left hand side there. And we could probably bring that into here a bit more with a little bit more color down there as well. But of course, there's lots of smaller details, so we can drop the brush size down to maybe 3%, and we can get in there with adding in, there's a little bit up here. You can see mine's not super accurate, but it's close. And that's all that matters. That's all that matters. So just a little something like this. We can go ahead and just introduce like a patch there. I want to keep it nice and light to start with though. And we'll let this one just run off as well on the right hand side there. And once you've got a good sort of layout like this, you can then go ahead and go back to the 6% if you want, and then just slowly start to sort of build up the color and the sort of grooves and the craters of the moon. And we can just have some fun creating some texture of the surface. And then I'm going to sort of jump between 6% and the 3%, just so I can, be a bit more specific. I'm just going to go round and round in a circle, keeping it nice and light to start with. Just over here, another one in this sort of space here. And introducing just a little bit of extra sort of texture. Now don't go too mad, because we are going to do some other layers here as well that are just going to nicely sort of just fill in the entire surface with some texture. So you don't need to literally think about every area. You can see I'm primarily just focusing on the actual sort of larger crater areas here. And sometimes you don't need to sort of make them super dark. You can just get in here and just make the edges a little bit darker if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and just continue this sort of patch over here and kind of darken up the bit that rolls around the side a bit more. Sort of filling in this area here. And again, you can go back in and then maybe darken up some of these smaller patches at the top, or go for an even smaller brush size if you feel like you need to, maybe like a little 1% here and there, and just introduce some extra smaller details, even in some of the larger areas. The odd sort of little line. At this point, I'm not really following the design or the image reference, should I say. I'm just adding in some very sort of small details here and there, and just trying to see what I can maybe sort of make look a bit more sort of like a crater and a bit more depth to it. Seeing what sort of extra little shapes I can come up with. And a little something like that is perfect for a sort of starting point. We're then going to go to our layers and tap on our moon shape again and create a new layer, and you'll notice it will stack itself in between. We're going to go back to the brush size of about 6%. You could probably go bigger, in fact. Let's go up to the 17, and we're just going to go round the surface just a couple of times. So go round it. It's going to make it a little bit darker, so try to be very sort of sparing with it, but we're just going to go round like that. Just adding in a little bit of extra texture. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layers. We'll go right to the top in this group and create a new layer. We'll go to our colors and grab the second color in the palette. And our brush wants to be set to the option of industrial, and we're going to use the wasteland brush. And what we're going to do is just roughly in a sort of square shape, just around our subject, just create like a bit of a box and then just make sure the inside's filled in, and you'll have this kind of rocky kind of texture. We're then going to go ahead and go to the layer. We'll tap on it and clip it in, and then drag it so it is the bottom one out of all three of the clip layers. And then we're just going to go up to our adjustments. So we're going to go to liquify. We're going to go to the option and change it to the option of expand. And size wise, you just want to make sure your brush is bigger than the circle, which it is at that point. So I've got 63% there. I could probably go a little bit smaller, and you can match up to the other settings there if you need to. And if we just hold down in the middle, we'll kind of warp that out a little bit, just creating more of a rounded surface and a bit more of a spherical look to those little details. And once you're done, you just tap away up in your layers, for example. We can then get started with adding in some shading. So we've got 3 stacked, and we want to add a new one so it becomes the third one. So you've got 4 stacked now, and the third one up is going to be our little shadow. So we're going to go to our colors and grab the third color on that top row. Brush wants to be set to the option of airbrushing and soft brush. And we want to be very, very light with this. Size wise, you probably want to be around about sort of 10%. Just be very, very sparing. We're just going to somewhat darken up the sort of the top left edge a tiny bit. And we'll go ahead and just bring that round the actual edge of the moon, just a little bit on the right side as well. So just a tiny bit on both sides, somewhat leaving the bottom a little bit more exposed, just sort of being a bit more spherical. Next, let's go ahead and add in some highlights as well. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go ahead and underneath our texture here, we're going to create a new layer, and we'll change the blend mode from normal and change it to add. We'll go to our color and change it to the one in the top left of the palette. And your brush still wants to be airbrushing and the soft brush. And we're going to very lightly, just in this spot here, just brighten this up. And I mean very, very lightly, and a little bit more towards the bottom. That's all you want to do for the moment. We're then going to go to our layers and tap on the texture at the top that's clipped and create another new layer. Tap on that and clip it into the stack, so it'll be the top one. And change the blend mode from normal and change it to add. And then what we're going to do on this layer is just introduce like a bit of a brighter tone in sort of the bottom area here, a bit more off to the right, so brighter tone down here, and then a little bit off in that top left area as well, so just a little bit of a brighter tone just up in that area there too. And I'm very happy with that. And what you can do is, if you need to, you've maybe pressed a bit too hard with these sort of textures here, you can always go back to that layer, this one here with all the texture on, and you can either lower the opacity of it, so you can tap on it and just lower the opacity, bring that down to a point that you're happy with. And if you drop it down to say 60% like I have, I'm pretty happy with how that looks. So I'm going to leave that and we'll crack on with the rest of the design. And the next step will be to add in some background elements such as stars. So we've got this group with the moon in. We can actually collapse that down now. We can create a new layer and drag it underneath that group. We can go to our colors and we can grab the white. So it's the second color on that top row. And our brush wants to be set to luminance and the light pen. It's my favorite for stars. It's maxed out on size. And depending on how hard you press, you can have a teeny tiny little star that'll have a glow on it. Or you can press really firm and you'll end up with a dot that's a little bit larger, a little bit brighter. So you just want to really vary up your pressure as you make your way all the way around your piece. So we're going to continue all the way around our design, just adding in some little sort of star constellations and have some fun creating some little areas in there, like where they are quite bunched together. You can let them then just sort of drift apart. Create some larger ones in here too. And really try to vary up your sizes. Again, my brush size is maxed out. And I can be super sort of busy in these areas. I can add in as much or as little as I like. I'm going to leave a little space just in this area here, just so I can add in a shooting star in a second. So rather than you have to erase it in a moment, just factor that in. Doesn't matter necessarily if you overlap anyway with a shooting star. And you can make it as busy again as you like. You can really tap away here, create a huge galaxy of stars. It's totally up to you how sort of big and sort of filled out you want your scene to be. I think it looks really cool because it makes it just look like it's just a massive bright sky tonight. And again, it's lovely, a little sort of silhouette. So a little something like this. I'm then going to go ahead and create a new layer. And I'm going to press quite firm and then get really light and just draw in a line. So I'm just going to start up here, press firm, and then just let that just run off like that. And you could even do that again and make that a little bit longer. Then grab your eraser tap on your eraser and make sure it's set to airbrushing in the soft brush. And you can just, with a brush size, it doesn't really matter, maybe around about sort of 10%, just blend out the back end of it. So just blend that out so it really just disappears a bit more, and you can take away a bit of that glow. So you end up with a little something like that. Let's add in some sort of background sort of variation to the sky. So this is just a very sort of small detail, but if we create a new layer, we can go to our colors. We're going to grab the 5th color on that top row. Our brush wants to be set to the option of textures and Dove Lake. And the brush size is set to about sort of 20%. And we're just going to sort of very lightly just add in these tiny little bits of just variation in the sky color. So I'm just adding in little sort of taps here and there, just seeing what fits and what doesn't, and just letting it sort of drop onto the screen. If it doesn't, it doesn't, like there, for example. And keeping it really light, because all we're going to do here is just a little scattering like this. We're going to go ahead and go to our adjustments and gauge and blur, and swipe from left to right, and we'll go up to something around about sort of 15%. It's just going to add in some just different variation in the sky, in the glows of it. So tapping on my adjustments, there's like a little patch of color here, there, and everywhere. Next, let's go ahead and add in the rest of the silhouette that's going to sit down here, because then we can add in our clouds as well. So we're going to go to our layers. We're going to go right to the top and create a new layer. We're going to go to our colors, and we're going to double tap at the bottom of the disk to select black. Our selection wants to be set to rectangle, and we're going to tap on color fill. And we're going to create some sort of metal railings here where our subject's just sort of sat next to or stood next to. So we're just going to create a bar that runs across like this, just roughly this sort of height. And when you let go, it will fill in that selection because we have color fill on. We're then going to go to our layers and create another new layer. So create a new layer. And we're going to create some of the vertical railings. So over here, I'm going to go to my selection tool again. I'm going to go ahead and create another bar, such as here. And that's pretty good to me. Just a little bit taller. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. I'm then going to go ahead and create another new layer. I'm going to go back to my brush and change it to calligraphy and the monoline brush. We'll keep it nice and small, and I'm just going to zoom in. The size, by the way, doesn't matter, but it's 7%. I'm just going to create a little ball head that's going to sit on the top. So a little circle, pop my finger on the screen, and something like that, and drag and drop the color in. Now, if you grab your cursor and you make sure snapping is turned on in the bottom left, if you then just position that here, you'll see that blue line that lets you know that circle perfectly sits in the sort of middle space of that pole. And there you go, you've got the sort of top of your railing. Now what we can go ahead and do is go to our layers. We can tap on the ball, so the circle, and tap on it and merge it down so it's on that layer there. And then we can swipe that to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, move that along to the right, pick a gap that you're happy with, go to your layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and just keep going until you fill it out. And you just want to sort of guesstimate really sort of the width of them. Go back to the layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate, grab your cursor and move it across again. Now the only thing I'm going to try and factor in is I don't want a railing to sort of sit beside her body too closely. So I'm going to go ahead and select all 4 of these, swiping from left to right on all of them. I'm going to grab my cursor and I'm just going to move this so I'm in control. I want this railing here to sit kind of close to her but not interrupt her silhouette. So if I tap on my cursor now, I want to duplicate this one and just fill in this gap. So if I go to the layer, it's that one there. I'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it, grab my cursor and move it into this gap here so that, again, you don't interrupt her silhouette in any way and everything has its own individual sort of shape and space. We can then go to the layers, we can swipe it to the left and duplicate it, and we can somewhat guesstimate. So we can somewhat say, well, one would be here, and then another one would be just in this gap over here, again giving her a perfect amount of space. And at this point you can adjust your railings if you need to. I'm going to grab my horizontal bar, for example. I might just move that a little bit higher up, and I may even grab the freeform option and just make it a little bit sort of chunkier and tap on my cursor when I'm done, just to give it a bit more sort of solid shape to it. And then we're going to go ahead and just simply pinch all of those layers of the railing together. We're going to go to our subject and we're going to tap on her and we're going to turn off the alpha lock that we turned on previously. We're going to again make sure our brush is set to the monoline brush under calligraphy. And all we're going to do is just exaggerate her sort of body a little bit more, so continue it on, should I say. all the way down towards the bottom of our canvas. So I'm just going to simply just draw in a somewhat leaning to the left line there. We'll go round, and I would imagine her bum would be round about here somewhere. So we can drag and drop the colour into there. And there we go. We've just extended that a little bit more so she fits the scene a bit better. Next, let's go ahead and add in some clouds. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to make sure we are underneath the moon group there that we created, and we'll create a new layer. And I'll tell you what, the stars and that little bit of glows in the background, we can swipe from left to right on all three of those, group them together as well, and that's our sky group in the back there. Now, so on this new empty layer, we want to make sure our color is set to the fourth color on that top row. Our brush wants to be set back into textures and Dove Lake, and the size for it is set to about sort of 6% to start with. Now what you're going to need to do is you're just going to need to turn off your background color before we carry on, because you won't be able to see this color just yet against the background. And we're going to go ahead and just draw in some clouds that nicely frame our moon. I don't want to cut in front of it in any way. So I'm just going to go ahead and with this brush, it looks a bit odd to start with. We're just going to create like lovely little bumps and lumps, like just little sort of bobbly areas like here. And that's going to be one cloud. I can go ahead and create another one that sort of just comes around from here. Keep that a little bit separated from the other one, just sort of giving it that little bit of space. Then we'll go ahead and create another one that runs down here, and we can just create like here, for example, like a long one that runs right behind our subject and kind of rolls up a little bit. Now you're going to need to somewhat remember your layout, what's in front of what. So for example, if I run this up into here, this one here needs to be in front of there. It's just your own sort of concept and your own layout. Just make sure that you can remember, if you just run over one just next to it, just remember which one is the more dominant one. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a larger one that's a little bit lower down. Now I'm going to set the brush size to about 11%. I'm just going to create a larger cloud just down here, for example. I want it to be a little bit different, so I'm just going to go ahead and try and just run that in behind our subject a bit more. And maybe even with a 6%, we also introduce another cloud just over here. It's a really cloudy sky at the bottom. Now at the minute, that doesn't look like much, of course. If we go to our colors and we grab our fifth color on that top row, we can now introduce some highlights. Now the moon is the light source, so anything that faces the light source is the edge that we want to add some highlight to. So I'm going to set the brush size still to, I'm going to go to the 3% mark. And just along this line here, I'm going to add some color. Now at this point, you may be able to introduce your background color, but again, it might be a bit tricky to see. So we're just going to go ahead and we'll sort of work out a middle ground. So in fact, what we'll do is we'll create a new layer, just a temporary one. We'll drag it towards where our background color is. We'll go to our colors and grab that sixth color on that top row. We'll drag and drop the color into that layer. We'll turn off our background and we'll tap on this new layer we just made and just lower the opacity down to about sort of 69% or 70. That way you can see both tones. So if we go back to our clouds, we make sure our color is still set to the fifth color on that top row. We can introduce those lovely highlights. So I've got a large sort of area here. So the top of this maybe gets some love. And then here where that cloud just runs down in behind our arm, and introduce some brighter tone there too. Now it doesn't necessarily just have to be on the top edges of them. You could add in like a little area here, for example, which is just catching the light somehow, some way. Now again, I spoke to you earlier about sort of making sure which ones are more dominant. This cloud here is going to be a bit more dominant, so I'm going to let this sort of have a large area of highlight up here. Keep it to a minimum though, really. Just trying to make sure that each layer of cloud has its own separation. So this one now nicely can sit in front of that one quite well. Likewise over here too. I'm just going to go ahead and create a little sort of fluffy edge to it. A couple of other little sort of smaller areas. Down here we've got the much larger cloud. I can go ahead and just introduce a little bit more on here. And then maybe I'll keep this one to a little bit more of a minimum because you can't really see it too well. You know, just like a little bit down here, a little bit in behind her arm there. And you can see once we get over to the right hand side, the clouds that we've created, such as here, they're now going to somewhat sort of face the other way, aren't they? Because the light source is in the center, they just kind of pivot around it. So introducing a little bit of brighter tone on here and a little bit on this cloud here at the back. Maybe make this one a little bit different, add in a bit more color. Now at this stage, again, it doesn't look like much, but what we're going to do is we're going to go to our smudge tool and tap on the smudge tool and change it to airbrushing and the medium brush. with a opacity of around about sort of 70% and a size of around about sort of 3%. We're going to get in here and do some smudging and just push things from sort of left to right a bit more. So we're going to spread out our clouds to the left. So the bits that we do now are going to be the nice smudged and soft areas. And then you can push your sort of shadow bits up towards that edge a little bit, just making sure that the edge of the cloud is a little bit sort of brighter. You see how we've just blended the two together and you end up with that lovely highlight right on the edge. Lovely stuff. And you can blur out what you want. For example, up here, I can just maybe just lightly just sort of push that top edge of the cloud off to the left. And I'm smudging to the left because I want to have this kind of lovely, quite horizontal, quite streaky look to the cloud. So just a little push here and there just to sort of blend them out, create that lovely smooth effect. And it gets rid of a little bit of that Dove Lake texture, for example, in here as well. Here, again, we're just going to push our shadows up towards that lovely bright edge of our clouds. And it just looks like really like the clouds, they're on our side, but the light source is on the opposite side. So it really does just allow that highlight to sit right on the tibbity top edge there. Here, I'm going to again push that a little bit higher, but maybe I want to keep a little bit of this fuzzy detail in here. So the white areas here in the clouds, they have like this lovely detail in them, which the Dove Lake does actually lend itself to. And I'm going to leave it. On the edge here though, maybe I'll smudge this out just a little bit to the right hand side. Here though, the rule again is just to push your shadows into your little areas there of your highlight. And we're just going to continue across the whole of the sky, but look at that effect. Like, look how cool that all looks. So we'll carry on here, and you may want to just vary it up. You don't have to leave the whole ledge, that top area bright. Maybe it's just a tiny bit. Maybe this cloud here is like, somewhat sat behind this one. So I can maybe take away quite a bit of that highlight and just leave a tiny bit up there. But maybe this one here really is facing the light source, so we can give that a lot of love. And maybe I'll feather that one out a bit more, smudge that one out. Likewise here. I think this one here is a little bit in behind that cloud, so maybe it doesn't need a full amount, but just enough. And again, we're pushing it out, pushing it horizontally, just trying to get that lovely streaky sky. And just take a look in your gaps where you've got the Dove Lake that's on its own with the shadows. Now the shadows themselves are pretty close to the background colour once we fully reintroduce it in a moment. And I did that on purpose just so that it's quite close and you can't really tell. All we want to see is the bright edges of the clouds. We don't want to see too much of the full shape of them. And that's looking awesome. Let's get under here as well. Blur that one out. Here where the light source is very, very close, I'm just going to smudge these ones out a little bit. Create like really fluffy clouds with the odd one then that's a little bit sharper on the edge. So I've left that texture of the Dove Lake. And then here again, we're just going to push these left to right, just create that real streaky look. And if you can get a little bit of colour that just drops in behind our subject, that'd be perfect. I've somewhat positioned these clouds on purpose just to try and, again, help us and aid us in seeing her silhouette. So just like we did with the railings and trying to, make sure she has enough space, I'm doing exactly the same now, but using the clouds just to try and really aid us in seeing where she is, what body composition is she in. I don't even think that's the right word, but you know what I mean. Her layout of her body, where all her limbs are, etc. So we'll streak these ones out again, just in case we can see any of them in the final part. Just streak out a few of them from left to right. It's a fantastic looking sky. We'll again use these clouds back here just to aid in seeing how she's stood, blurring them out, pushing up towards those lovely bright edges. And then I'm just going to smudge a tiny bit of these ones to the left, just again so I can just see where her back is as well here. We should have this fantastic looking design, and we can just go ahead and bring that layer back up to 100%, and you should have these fantastic looking clouds. Now what we need to do is though, we need to position these clouds above these glows, and those glows of the moon are in fact inside that group. So if we hold down on this layer and we move it underneath our subject, you should now then see those shadows come into play. So now we've got far more contrast in our sky. Now what you can do here, if you like the look of your clouds, please leave them. But what you could do is you go to your selection tool, make sure color fill is turned off. Using the freehand option, you could maybe just, if you can, just grab a cloud that's like very much on its own, such as here. Grab your cursor and just scale it up in size, like make this one a little bit larger. It's very easy to create them all at a similar size. Whereas if I do this now, I've got like a much larger cloud down here, right at the very bottom of our design. You can move that up a little bit, let it overlap some of the other ones. But you may need to go ahead and just, for example, go to the option of swiping down with 3 fingers and go to the option of cut, and then swipe down with 3 fingers and go to the option of paste, and then redo that, just so it's on a separate layer, and then you can blend out any solid lines that you can see. So this is just like a little refinement, really. So now I can go ahead and grab my eraser, tap on the eraser, making sure it's set to soft airbrush, and I'm just going to blend out that line that I can see, that solid line, blend that out. Give all those clouds a bit more love again. And I think that's pretty much disappeared from there. But we've got a lovely graduation in all of those clouds. And then just some extra little final additions. I'm going to go ahead and on our subject, I'm going to swipe her to the left and duplicate her. The bottom one out of the two, tap on that layer and invert it to white. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our adjustments, Gaussian blur, and swipe from left to right. We're going to go ahead and just make that run about 10%. And then we're going to go to our layer. We're going to change the blend mode from normal. We'll change it to add. But we're going to reduce this all the way down. And this is a bit more of an artistic liberty. I'm going to drop it down to about sort of 7%. Then grab my cursor and just maybe move her sort of glow just to the left hand side of her just a little bit more by just bringing in the bottom right node using the uniform option. So it was here. I just bringing that in just a tiny bit. And the glow then will just sit a little bit on the left hand side. All this is, again, artistic liberty to just try and show, again, her perfect sort of silhouette. So it's a dark figure on quite a dark background. We just want to try and bring her out the design a bit more. We can go ahead and then pinch with 2 fingers. We can go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram. You can also go ahead and share them in my Discord. Both will be linked in the description down below. Come and join in with the community over on Discord. If you didn't already know, I post weekly tutorials here on my YouTube channel, so make sure to hit the subscribe button, and while you're down there, drop a like on the video. And if you want even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon. My supporters help make these videos possible, and in return they get 3 exclusive tutorials every single month that's added to a catalogue now of over 70 tutorials, nearly 80 at the time of recording. Have your name featured in videos, sneak peeks, early access, and much, much more. So hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And if you like this video, you'll probably like this one on the screen now. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.